VikesNow, I am Dustin Baker, bringing in the other Dustin. He joins us today to talk about the Vikings' 24-13 loss at the Seattle Seahawks in a game that started relatively promising, a 10-0 lead with the second teamers on the field. Nick Mullins looked pretty decent, but as soon as he got off the field and third teamers came on, it was doldrums. The lead slipped away. There was some dumbass mistakes, multiple penalties. And we're going to unpack those and go through some of the reactions and takeaways from the Vikings' first preseason game. But alas, Dustin is here. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Yeah, it's finally great to be back here talking some Vikings football. It's been a long waited time to have some Vikings football back in our lives, and we finally got it. Yeah, it's preseason, but I'll take any football I can get.
Amen. I think I tweeted the other day that for the next 22 weeks, we will have Vikings football every weekend or week, sans Labor Day and the bye week. So we got 22 weeks of this stuff. In case I forget, kind sir, where can the guys and gals, find you on Twitter and TikTok?
All right. So on Twitter, I had to make a new account because my account got suspended out of nowhere. So I am that Vikings fan number two on Twitter. You can follow me there. I'm also on TikTok, that Vikings fan. So you can find me both places there.
And it looks like you had some fun at training camp, at least a couple times, right, in the past 2 weeks?
Yeah, I've been there maybe total of four total collective days the past 2 weeks. It's been fun going there as a fan and observing, different positions, different storylines too. Example like Ivan Pace, Jaron Hall, just seeing those different
Mm-hmm.
guys play in training camp and see how, that all goes about.
I'm super excited from a selfish perspective about Ivan Pace because I was asked about 3 different times in the last 2 months to come up with a bold prediction for the Vikings summer and training camp. And all 3 times I stay consistent. I said Ivan Pace is going to break out and he's going to deliver on his promise that y'all done effed up for not drafting him. So I have a vested interest in him being good. And alas, he is. So what we're going to do is unpack this first preseason game. For the future here, the Vikings take on the Titans 8 days from now at US Bank Stadium. And then the week after that is the Cardinals at US Bank Stadium. But we don't care which order you rank them in. Let's get 5 reactions or takeaways, and it starts with you, good sir.
All right. Yeah. So my first one, I think it's a pretty obvious one, I would say. And that's Brian Flores' defense making an impact early. Uh, Last season we had Ed Donatel, obviously, and I think it's a night and day difference, even though it is preseason and we try not to overreact to this stuff. But it's just a totally different thing. You can tell in preseason that they're already running, sorry for the nerdiness here, but they're running big nickel defense. The pass rush is getting home most times. And that's not something that we really saw too much from Ed Donatel a season ago. And you can just tell just by the players, the scheme, everything, that even in a preseason game that they're playing more aggressive. They're in the collective right spots most of the time, minus Andrew Booth, and some other guys too. But yeah, I think Brian Flores' defense is making an impact early and often.
Yeah, it's really cool because if you think about it, the Vikings haven't had a crisp, fly all over the place defense since about 2019, and that's 4 damn years ago. For context, in 2020, we thought it would be good, but then Danielle Hunter was lost for the year, and that was a death blow. And then each year, we kind of hope that it recovers and gets back to that old 2018, 2019, and of course, 2017 form, and it has not. So we've gone through 4 calendar years of defensive, like, it's never absolutely atrocious. It's just never very good. And I agree with you. Those second teamers last night had a different feel. They were more nimble. They were flying all over the place. And a guy like Luigi Villan, to me, stood out and could perhaps end up making the 53-man roster. So I wholeheartedly agree that at least for a preseason game, at least with the backups, everything felt different. It felt a little bit faster and younger, which is what they were going for all off season. What's number two, my man?
Number two, I have Ty Chandler as I think a solid and foreseeable RB2 in this offense. Obviously, Alexander Madison did not play last night, which, that's fine with me. Rest your starters as much as possible. But Ty Chandler, 11 carries for 41 yards, I think is pretty convincing for the time that he got. I think we only had two or three other running backs the whole game. We had Abram Smith and Dwayne McBride, but Ty Chandler got a bulk of those carries, and yeah, they did split some of them. But Ty Chandler, I think he's going to have a vital role in this Kevin O'Connell offense in 2023.
I agree. The first depth chart, for some reason or another, said that Kene Nwangu was the RB2. And I get it from experience. Like, he's only been in the league 2 years, but a lot of times on those first unofficial depth charts, it feels like they just plop the veterans in the top spots and then say, go figure it out the rest of the way. But Ty Chandler, I think, always had the inside track at RB2 because he's a quasi draft pick. And then last night, just like last preseason, as you'll recall, he looked really good. And last year, they didn't really need him because they had Madison, they had Dalvin Cook, and Kene Nwangu. And now they don't have Dalvin Cook, and Kene is, I think, temporarily hampered by something. And so I think Chandler could have even been a contributor last year. They just didn't really need him. So now for the next two preseason games, we figure out if Chandler is going to be the real deal at RB2. And the reason I think this matters, as you can attest, is there's a decent chance this running back room does more of a committee approach because we're so used to bell cows with Adrian Peterson and Dalvin Cook that this might be when the tide turns. So wholeheartedly agree with you on Chandler. The other thing I'm always paranoid about, and you'll remember this from last year, sometimes in the preseason, dudes will have wonderful moments in games, and then that doesn't mean anything. Remember T.Y. McGill last year? He looked like a ball.
Great
like
preseason body.
Yeah, and then even Armon Watts ended up getting cut. So between Armon Watts and T.Y. McGill leaving, I was trying to figure out, God, what else has McGill got to do? So I certainly don't think that'll happen with Chandler because he's a quasi draft pick. But I will tell guys and gals watching that sometimes the preseason, if you see a dude looking fabulous, whether that's Chandler or Luigi Villan, it doesn't necessarily guarantee a roster spot, which will always be weird to me because they're probably in their heart of hearts thinking, well, what the hell did I do wrong? All right, so we got the Brian Flores defense feeling different, looking the part, showing up, at least the second teamers. You've got Ty Chandler standing out, and I also agree. What is number 3?
Number 3 is kind of sticking with the offense as well. It's the O-line depth is kind of concerning to me. I know it's only preseason game 1, but the depth behind, the starting 5, Darisaw, Cleveland, Bradbury, Ingram played last night, and then Blake Brandel, I think, was the right tackle, or Vidarian Lowe, one of those two.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, ever since, Jaron Hall got in there, whether that's a second or third team guys, Hall kind of just looked flustered. I mean, the all offensive line was atrocious, giving Hall no time. Ty Chandler or whoever the running back was, just trouble finding lanes to run through. There was a couple screens that Ty Chandler had to kind of make his own play, if you will, because the offensive line really wasn't blocking too much. So if they can clean some stuff up for the next 2 games, I think it's kind of concerning to start off with.
Yeah, it certainly is. The good news is, and I'll say this really cynically, is we're used to this. It's like we already know that the offensive line, the second teamers we have this hypocrisy where the second team defense looks pretty good and that matters. But if the offensive line second team looks like shit, we're like, yeah, that doesn't really matter. And, we fully own it. And I'm right there with you. And I will caveat it that Ed Ingram was the only guy out there who was classified as a starter, which might be a little concerning for his sake. He'd probably wonder, especially during the Dalton Reisner sweepstakes, why the hell am I on the field when all of the other established starters are not? But yeah, the offensive line was uninspiring. I think the only solace we can take is knowing that the 4 main guys, Christian Darrisaw, Brian O'Neill, Ezra Cleveland, Garrett Bradbury, did not play. But yes, this is familiar territory. I swear to God, since Hutchinson or McKinney left the team, every year with the offensive line, we're kind of like just hoping that it doesn't suck. And last year, it looked like it got a little bit better at times. And because it didn't rank on the bottom of PFF's list and everything, we had like a little parade. But it's still, we're really hoping that the starters, continuity's sake anyhow, really bump it up. Because when you have an offense first head coach like Kevin O'Connell, we shouldn't just settle for average. It should be paramount that this former quarterback touts the supremacy of an offensive line. So yeah, right. Again, you're nailing these on the head, sir. What is, let's see, we're to number 4.
Number four, going to defense now. I'm going to be switching a little bit back and forth, but Ivan Pace is as good as advertised. I know we were kind of alluding to that before, but for the time that he's played, four tackles, good, decent in pass coverage too. But one thing I've noticed too is he had the green dot last night. So as an undrafted free agent, having the green dot, that's huge for Ivan Pace. For those of you that don't know, the green dot on your helmet for a middle linebacker is basically the play caller on that defense. So as an undrafted free agent rookie, having the green dot, I think that's huge for Pace. It shows that the coaches have a lot of trust in him. I thought that he would be a little more active last night, whether that's pass rush, sacks, stuff like that. There's a couple highlights of him, pounding the right guard, putting him on his back,
Mm-hmm.
and, just blowing plays up, which is very nice to see.
Yeah, and I think this is a real cool tale because I understand that 5'11" is a little miniature for an off-ball linebacker, but who really cares if you want to invest a fifth, sixth, or seventh rounder in a guy who was a total machine at Cincinnati? I can't believe, even if he's an inch and a half too short, that there wouldn't be one general manager, 32 of them during the draft, that said, you know what, I'm going to spend my seventh rounder on this guy who was ultra productive in college. So the reason I like this tale is because when he posted that thing on Instagram that y'all done effed up with him like looking like Superman, it was either going to be that this is just some player who's all about the hype and smoke, or he's telling the truth. He knows in his heart of hearts that, oh, you guys are morons, and now I'm going to go ball out. So I think if there was a real thing as like maybe there is real Mr. Mankato voting, he for sure is going to win that award at Vikings training camp. And then yeah, we're looking at this thing between Brian Asamoah and Jordan Hicks, likely the starters. Like Pace is going to be next man up if something happens via injury, and something probably will happen. Hopefully, it's just minor to one of the starters, and he might get some real run as an undrafted free agent. And it seems like the summer is like softening us up for that. Like we've got the hype, you got the performance, you've got a linebacker room that isn't crazy deep. It feels like it is ripe for Pace to emerge, and I'm glad you called it out because last night could have been an opportunity where he got in real live game action against second teamers and was like, oh, okay, we were just doing the thing about training camp. He ain't that good. But no, he was flying all over the place. So I'm right there with you. What is your final reaction or takeaway from Vikings-Seahawks?
The final one, I think we're going back to offense here. I think the wide receiver depth behind JJ, KJ, and Jordan Addison, I think it looks pretty promising. Rager kind of fell into his own last night, four receptions, 55 yards. He's, I think, doing a lot better. He has finally a full offseason with the Vikings instead of, just being traded before week one and then just playing the season then. But having a full offseason really helps Jalen Rager. He looked really good last night. Brandon Powell, I personally didn't think that he would get any offensive reps throughout the preseason or anything like that. I thought he'd be strictly just punt returner, kick returner, whatever he was initially brought here to be. But he's looking pretty good. Very shifty, fast. For being 5'8", 5'9", whatever he is. Two receptions, 22 yards. I think that was pretty fine. And then our newest offseason addition with N'Keal Harry, two
Mm-hmm.
receptions, 24 yards. A lot of people didn't think that he would have any part really in this offense, but two receptions, 24 yards. I think one of his catches is either the first or the second one of two that he had a really great diving catch. He's just a really big body, almost looks like a tight end. But yeah, I think any of those wide receivers, even Thayer Thomas, I really like him too. If they can find a way to solidify themselves on this roster, I think that would be huge. So yeah, if there happens to be an injury on this wide receiver starting core, the top three, three deep, part two, I think that we'd be in pretty good hands.
So I'm going to ask you this. So is it your assumption, like for certain, that Jalen Naylor makes the team?
I would think Jalen Naylor makes the team.
Okay, so Justin Jefferson 1, probably Osborne 2, could be interchangeable. 3 at Addison, Jalen Naylor at 4. Last year they kept 5 wide receivers, so between or maybe you'll if you're going to do a projection up it to 6. I don't know who you'd cut, but who makes the team out of Rager, Powell, Harry, I think Tristan Jackson, Blake Prohl. Let's assume it's a WR5 spot. It's got to be one of those guys, and it's a tough task. Do you think it's Rager just because of the incumbency?
It is a tough spot to give to. When you have so much talent in that wide receiver room, behind those three major guys. But I think Jalen Reagor takes the wide receiver 5 spot just because of his salary. It's all guaranteed. Why let go of someone like that? I mean, you never know with Kwesi, but Brandon Powell, I could see him possibly getting cut, maybe practice squad. N'Keal Harry, I could see him just getting straight up cut, maybe not resigning him. But there's a lot of these guys. Maybe I could see maybe 2, 3 guys on the practice squad for the wide receiver position. I could be wrong. It could be just 1 or 2, but I, I think that they're going to have to earn their spot to be a wide receiver 5. They could carry a 6 wide receiver, just as a punt returner, kick returner like Brandon Powell. But with someone like Jalen Reagor, if he comes into his own these next couple games, I think he'll probably solidify himself as wide receiver 5.
Yeah, I would love to say the solution is they'll just keep 6 wide receivers and call it good. And it's on a show like this where we don't have to be accountable. That sounds great. But let me tell you, when you're going in to dice up a trim down from 90 to 53, you usually get it down to like 59. And you're like, oh, God. Now I have to go find 6 other dudes that won't make it. And if that's just, a guy doing it in his office, imagine the stress and stakes for somebody like Kwesi Mensah or I guess Kevin O'Connell in this situation.
I'm glad I'm not doing it.
I hear you. All right. So we've had 7 months of an off season, a free agency, a draft headline by Jordan Addison, a mini camp, about 3 weeks of training camp, and a preseason game. The final question I got for you is how are you feeling about this team? Where are you at? Are you like, all right, these guys are going to side eye compete for a Super Bowl, or what do you got?
Well, I think this team is going to be, I think, a good contender. Maybe not Super Bowl contender, but definitely in the playoffs. They're gonna, play around a little bit. I think this defense is overall better than last year. Yeah, we lost a couple guys, but I think it's subtraction and then grab some younger guys. Eric
Mm-hmm.
Kendricks was getting older and slower. You're re-signing Harrison Smith, a very reliable, great safety that we have. Danielle Hunter's coming back. And then you got some young rising stars on this defense that we don't quite know yet what they are. But with Brian Flores, I think that's the best defensive acquisition that we've had this past year. I don't think you can get any better than that. So that's just how it is. Offense, that's I think it'll be top 5 this year. There's no reason why it shouldn't, bearing injury or whatnot. So this team, I could see definitely 9 to 11 wins, still winning the division, playing around in the playoffs, flirting with that. And then, competing with the Lions, I guess, for second or, first, second place, whoever wins that. But yeah, I think that this team is still going to be good this next year.
On Flores, it's worth noting that Vikings line or former linebacker Ben Lieber sat on the sidelines last year, or excuse me, sat on the sidelines last night. I think Paul Allen said, "Didn't you say that Brian Flores was going to be the best offseason addition for the Vikings?" And he said, "No, I said he's going to be the best NFL offseason addition in general." So if a former linebacker with serious ties to the Vikings is pounding that drum, it's probably not just smoke. And so I'm right there with you with Flores. We're asking him to do more with less in terms of all the experienced guys. If you look at it pound for pound, Dalvin Tomlinson, Patrick Peterson, Eric Kendricks, Duke Shelley, all of those guys, Zadarius Smith, all of those guys are gone. And you're telling a new defensive coordinator, like, go do the thing with all of these younger guys. And somehow we, like the local voices, think it will work. if you pull up any national article about a Vikings preview or NFC North predictions, almost every single one of them says the Vikings lost Dalvin Cook, Adam Thielen. I don't know how they're going to replace them. It feels like locally we're the only people that know that those guys weren't going to get better at this point in the career. And Kwesi in this competitive rebuild is saying, all right, well, if you're not going to get better, you can go elsewhere, and we're going to cultivate these young guys. All right, my man, let's do this. I want you back on before the start of the regular season, so that is 30 days away. You hit my line in about 3 weeks, and we can really start to size up the regular season. That sound like a plan?
That sounds like an awesome plan. I will do that.
All right, sir. We'll talk to you in 3 weeks. You take it easy.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Later, man.